Emma Collins stood behind the counter of the diner, the familiar smell of bacon and fresh coffee surrounding her, like a warm blanket on a cold day. At 17, she had already learned the weight of responsibility. Her mother's illness had turned their lives upside down, and Emma was determined to keep their small household afloat. She wiped her brow with the back of her hand, the grease from the grill mixing with her sweat. "Hey, Emma, can you refill Table 3's coffee?" called out Sarah, the diner's manager, her voice cutting through the busy morning rush. Emma nodded, a smile breaking through her worries as she grabbed the coffee pot. She moved swiftly between the tables, her mind racing not just with orders but with dreams of a better life. She envisioned college, a full scholarship, and a chance to escape the suffocating grip of poverty that had defined her childhood. As she poured coffee, she overheard snippets of conversation from nearby tables. The patrons, mostly locals, were gossiping about an upcoming charity gala hosted by the town's wealthiest socialite, Vivian Porter. "Did you hear she's showcasing that diamond necklace? The one worth $7,000? A woman exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. Emma couldn't help but roll her eyes. To her, the gala sounded like yet another display of wealth that would only serve to highlight the stark divide between the rich and the poor in their small town. "Emma, don't forget to keep smiling." Sarah's voice broke through her thoughts once more. Emma plastered on a smile, but inside she felt a familiar pang of resentment. How could people celebrate such opulence while others struggled to make ends meet? The day wore on, and as evening approached, Emma's shift came to an end. She grabbed her things and headed home, her thoughts still lingering on the gala. She had heard rumors about the extravagant event, and part of her longed to be part of that world, even if just for a night. But reality pulled her back as she entered their modest apartment, where her mother lay in bed, pale and frail. "Hey, Mom," Emma whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I'm home." Her mother smiled weakly, the love in her eyes shining brighter than any diamond. "How was work, sweetheart?" "Busy as usual, but I heard about the gala. I wish I could go." Her mother reached out, placing a hand over Emma's. "You will one day, Emma. Just keep working hard." Emma nodded, but doubts clouded her mind. She could only dream of a life beyond their cramped apartment, where she wouldn't have to worry about bills or her mother's health. The next evening, the diner was unusually quiet. Emma was about to close up when a group of elegantly dressed women entered, their laughter ringing like bells. They were clearly from the upper crust of society, and Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Excuse me, can we get a few drinks?" one of the women asked, her tone dismissive. Emma forced a smile and nodded, moving to prepare their orders. As she worked, she overheard snippets of their conversation about the gala. They spoke of Emma's mother and her illness, their words dripping with feigned sympathy. "Poor thing. I heard she's really struggling," one woman remarked, her voice laced with condescension. "Maybe someone should do something," another chimed in, but her tone suggested it was merely a passing thought, not an actual intent. Emma clenched her fists, anger rising within her. After serving the drinks, Emma retreated to the back room, her heart pounding. She couldn't shake the feeling that they saw her as nothing more than a charity case. But she brushed aside her frustration, reminding herself that she had to stay focused on the future. Little did she know that the events of the gala would soon entangle her life in a way she could never have imagined. The following night, as she watched the sun dip below the horizon, she felt a strange pull toward the gala. An unexpected opportunity seemed to linger in the air, hinting at change. Meanwhile, at the gala, the atmosphere was electric. Vivian Porter stood tall in her designer gown, the diamond necklace sparkling around her neck, a symbol of her wealth and status. The crowd reveled in the extravagance, unaware that the night would soon take a dark turn. As Emma lay in bed that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change forever. She had no idea of the storm brewing just beyond her doorstep, ready to redefine everything she thought she knew about herself, her town, and the people who inhabited it. The courtroom was a battleground of emotions, the air thick with tension as the proceedings commenced. Emma Collins sat at the defendant's table, her heart racing as she grasped the edges of her chair, her palms clammy. Across the room, Vivian Porter, adorned in a designer outfit, sat with an air of confidence, flanked by her formidable legal team. Emma's attorney, Mark, a young lawyer with a fierce determination in his eyes, stood to address the judge, his voice unwavering despite the pressure mounting around them. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Mark began, his voice echoing in the silent courtroom, "today we will prove that my client, Emma Collins, is innocent of the charges levied against her. She is not a thief. She is a victim of circumstance." Vivian's attorney, Sarah, smirked as she leaned forward, ready to pounce on any signs of weakness. "Your Honor," she interjected smoothly, "the evidence speaks for itself. A valuable necklace worth $7,000 vanished from my client's possession, and the last person seen near that display was none other than Emma Collins." Mark clenched his jaw, glancing over at Emma, whose face had paled. He knew the odds were stacked against them, but he was determined to fight. "With all due respect, Miss Sarah, evidence can be misconstrued. We will show that this case is not as black and white as it appears." As the trial progressed, Vivian was called to the stand. She rose with an air of elegance, but her eyes were cold as she took her place. Mark's heart sank. He had expected her to play the victim, but he hadn't anticipated the extent of her embellishments. "I was hosting a charity gala," Vivian recounted, her voice dripping with feigned anguish. "As I turned to greet my guests, I noticed Emma lurking by the display case. Moments later, the necklace was gone. I felt so violated. How could anyone do such a thing?" Her eyes darted toward Emma, catching her gaze with a smirk. Emma's stomach churned as she listened to Vivian twist the truth. She wanted to shout to defend herself, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she clenched her fists, fighting back tears. How could this woman manipulate the situation so effortlessly? After Vivian's testimony, Mark stood to cross-examine her. "Miss Porter, you claim you saw Emma near the necklace display. Is it possible you misidentified her? After all, there were numerous guests at the gala." Vivian's gaze hardened. "I know what I saw, Mr. Mark. Emma was there, and I will never forget that moment." Mark pressed on, determined to expose the cracks in her story. "But you did not actually see her take the necklace, did you?" Vivian hesitated, her composure wavering for just a moment. "No, but—" "Thank you," Mark interrupted, sensing the shift. "You have no concrete evidence linking Emma to the theft. Only your word." The tension in the courtroom thickened as Mark sat down, his heart racing. Emma felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished as Sarah rose to seal the moment. "Your Honor, I would like to present more evidence that supports Miss Porter's claims," she said, producing a series of photographs from the gala. The images displayed Emma standing close to the display case, her eyes wide with surprise. Emma's heart sank as she saw the photos, her breath hitching in her throat. It felt as if the walls were closing in on her. Just then, a commotion erupted from the back of the courtroom. A figure emerged, a witness who had been hesitant to come forward. The man, looking disheveled and nervous, raised his hand, catching the attention of the judge. "Your Honor, I saw someone leaving the gala with a bag. It wasn't Emma." Mark's heart leaped at the sight of the man, a glimmer of hope igniting within him. "Can you describe what you saw?" he asked, stepping forward. The witness swallowed hard, glancing nervously at Vivian. "I was outside having a smoke when I saw a figure, someone in a dark coat, hurrying away." It didn't look like Emma. Emma leaned forward, her breath quickening. "Please," she whispered to Mark, "ask him to tell the truth." But the witness hesitated, fear evident in his eyes. "I don't want any trouble. I just—" Mark stepped closer, his voice firm yet gentle. "I understand your fear, but the truth is important. Emma's life is on the line. You could help her." The witness glanced between Mark and Emma, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Emma felt a surge of desperation, praying he would summon the courage to reveal what he knew. Emma Collins stood in the dimly lit room of her mother's small house, the muffled sounds of the world outside barely reaching her. Her mother lay bedridden, the weight of illness etched on her pale face, yet her eyes flickered with a fierce resolve that belied her frail state. Emma squeezed her mother's hand, feeling the warmth of her touch, and leaned in closer. "Emma, you have to fight for your innocence," her mother whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Don't let them take away your future." "I'm trying, Mom," Emma replied. her heart heavy with the burden of the accusations laid upon her. "But what can I do? Everyone believes Vivian. They think I'm a thief." "Sometimes the truth is buried deep," her mother said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You need to dig it out. Be brave." With newfound determination coursing through her, Emma left her mother's side and ventured out into the night. The moon hung high, casting a silvery glow over the town, and she made her way to the gala venue that had become the stage of her downfall. The opulence of the place stood in stark contrast to her reality, but she had to uncover the truth. Sneaking through the side entrance, Emma felt her heart race with each step. The grand hall, once filled with laughter and chatter, was now silent and haunting. She recalled the moments of chaos when the necklace had vanished, the accusing eyes of Vivian Porter piercing through her like daggers. She made her way to the security office, where she hoped to find the elusive footage that could clear her name. As she entered the small room, a flicker of hope ignited within her. The surveillance monitor displayed a series of grainy clips, but as she began fast-forwarding through the recordings, her heart sank. The footage was disjointed, with numerous gaps where critical moments should have been captured. Suddenly, she noticed something odd. One of the cameras had been tampered with, the wiring slightly pulled away from the wall. "What the hell?" she muttered to herself, her mind racing. If the footage had been altered, it could mean that someone was trying to hide the truth. Who would go to such lengths to protect their secrets? With her heart pounding, Emma took a few pictures of the tampered camera and then swiftly made her way out of the venue. The night air felt electric against her skin, and as she walked home, she began to formulate a plan. She needed to present this evidence to Mark, her attorney, and hopefully convince the judge to allow further investigation. The next day in the courtroom, tension hung thick in the air as Mark prepared to present his case. Emma sat at the defendant's table, her heart pounding as she glanced at Vivian, who sat in the front row, a smug expression on her face. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. "Your Honor," Mark began, his voice steady yet filled with urgency, "I would like to request a brief recess to explore new evidence that may point to an alternative suspect in this case." Vivian's expression darkened. "What nonsense is this?" she exclaimed, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're just trying to waste the court's time." "Your Honor," Mark pressed, ignoring Vivian's outburst, "I believe we have a substantial reason to suspect that the circumstances surrounding the theft are not as clear-cut as they appear. There are discrepancies in the security footage from the gala, suggesting that someone else may have been involved." The judge raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What kind of discrepancies?" Emma's heart raced at the opportunity. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, I found evidence that indicates the security footage was tampered with. If we could investigate this further, it may lead us to the real thief." The judge considered this, glancing between Emma and Vivian. "Very well, I will allow for further investigation, but be cautious. This court will not tolerate any frivolous claims." As relief washed over her, Emma felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since the accusations began. But as she glanced at Vivian, she could see the anger simmering beneath the surface, her eyes flashing with a mix of outrage and fear. The battle was far from over, but for Emma, the seeds of truth had been planted. She was ready to fight back, not just for herself, but for her mother and the future she longed for. Emma sat on the worn wooden bench in the courthouse hallway, her heart racing as she exchanged anxious glances with Mark, her attorney. The air was thick with tension, and the muffled voices of the lawyers and court officials only heightened her anxiety. Mark had spent the last few days delving into Vivian's past, unearthing information that could potentially shift the tide of the case. "Emma," Mark said softly, leaning closer, "I found something unsettling about Vivian. It seems she's had a pattern of manipulating situations to her advantage, especially against those who are less fortunate." He paused, gauging her reaction. "We need to confront this, but we have to be strategic." Emma nodded, her mind racing. The implications of Mark's words were daunting. "What do you mean by manipulating situations? Is there a way to use that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark took a deep breath. "If we can gather enough evidence to show that she has a history of deceit, It could lend credibility to your defense. We need to find witnesses who can testify to her behavior. As they brainstormed possible avenues for investigation, Emma felt a mix of dread and determination swelling within her. She had been labeled a thief, a title that clung to her like a shadow, and she was resolute in her quest to clear her name. Later that day, Emma decided to confront her classmates about the rumors that had spread like wildfire after the gala. She walked into the local high school cafeteria, her heart pounding as she approached a group of students who were huddled together, their whispers ceasing as she neared. "Hey, can we talk?" she said, trying to sound confident despite the knot in her stomach. One girl, Jessica, stepped forward. "What do you want, Emma? You're the one who stole from Vivian. Everyone knows it." Emma took a deep breath, her voice steadying. "I didn't steal anything. I need you all to understand that. It's not just about me, it's about the truth." A boy named Jake crossed his arms. "Why should we believe you? Vivian's got all the money and power. You're just, well, you know." "Just what?" Emma retorted, her frustration seeping through. "Just poor? Just a nobody? You think I'm guilty because I don't have a silver spoon in my mouth? This isn't just about class. It's about justice." Some students shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. A few nodded in agreement, but many remained dismissive, their expressions reflecting an ingrained bias that fueled the divide between them. "Emma, listen," Jessica finally said, a hint of empathy creeping into her tone. "You've got to realize that people believe what they want to believe. It's easier than facing the truth." Emma felt a flicker of hope at Jessica's words, but the sense of isolation weighed heavily on her. "I just want to clear my name. I need your support, not your judgment." As she walked away, Emma's heart sank. The class divide was palpable, and while some offered glimmers of understanding, others were firmly entrenched in their perceptions. Days passed, and Mark continued to dig deeper into Vivian's affairs. They discovered that Vivian's assistant, Lily, had been seen near the necklace display right before it went missing. Unbeknownst to Emma, Mark had already arranged to speak with Lily, hoping to uncover the truth behind her involvement. One afternoon, as Emma sat in Mark's office, he leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Emma, we need to talk about Lily. There's a chance she might have motive. She's been working for Vivian for years, and there have been whispers about her wanting to step out of Vivian's shadow." Emma's eyes widened. "You think she could have set me up?" Mark nodded gravely. "It's possible. If she thought framing you would distract from her own ambitions, she might have taken that risk. We need to find out more about her relationship with Vivian." With each piece of evidence they uncovered, the web of deception began to tighten around Vivian. Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose as she and Mark strategized their next steps. "Let's set up a meeting with Lily," Mark proposed. "If we can get her to talk, it might lead us closer to the truth." Emma's heart raced at the thought. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, but for the first time since the accusations began, a flicker of hope ignited within her. She might finally be on the brink of uncovering the truth. As the tension in the courtroom reached a fever pitch, Mark stood up, his heart pounding as he prepared to call his next witness. The air was thick with anticipation, and Emma sat on the edge of her seat, her palms clammy against the polished wood of the table. She felt as if the entire room was holding its breath. "Your Honor," Mark said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them, "I would like to call Lily Thompson to the stand." A murmur rippled through the audience as Lily, Vivian's assistant, was summoned. She walked up to the witness stand, her expression a mix of fear and defiance. Emma's heart raced. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment that could turn the tide in her favor. "Miss Thompson," Mark began, his eyes locked on hers, "can you tell us about the events that transpired on the night of the gala?" Lily hesitated, glancing nervously at Vivian, who sat with a scowl on her face, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the armrest of her chair. She stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what you mean. Let's be clear," Mark pressed, leaning in slightly. "You were present when the necklace went missing, correct?" "Yes," Lily replied, her voice gaining a hint of strength. "And did you see Emma Collins near the display case?" "No," she said more firmly now. "I didn't see her." The courtroom erupted in murmurs again, the spectators exchanging glances, their intrigue palpable. Emma could feel the hope surging within her, but she held her breath, waiting for Mark to push further. "Then why did you tell the police that you saw Emma there?" Mark's voice was calm but insistent. Lily's eyes darted around the room, and Emma noticed the flicker of panic in her expression. "I thought—" "What did you think?" Mark pressed, his tone sharp. "Did you think it would protect you?" Lily's facade cracked. "I didn't want to lose my job," she burst out, tears brimming in her eyes. "Vivian said she would fire me if I didn't help her. I was scared." Gasps filled the courtroom, and Emma's heart soared. This was it. The truth was finally surfacing. "Miss Thompson," Mark continued, "did you take the necklace?" "Yes," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I took it. I thought if I blamed Emma, no one would suspect me." The chaos in the courtroom intensified, with whispers and exclamations erupting all around. Emma watched as Vivian's face turned a shade of crimson, her lips pressed tightly together in a thin line of fury. "Objection!" Vivian's attorney Sarah shouted, standing up. "This is a fabrication. There's no evidence to support her claims." "Your Honor," Mark countered, "the witness is confessing to the crime. The jury deserves to hear this." The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on her nose, nodded slowly, allowing the testimony to continue. "Lily," Mark pressed gently, "did Vivian know about your plan to frame Emma?" Lily glanced nervously at Vivian, who was now seething with rage. "Yes," she admitted reluctantly. "She knew everything. I didn't think it would go this far." Vivian shot to her feet, her voice shrill. "This is ridiculous. You can't believe her. She's just trying to save herself." But the damage was done. The courtroom was alive with murmurs of disbelief and anger. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she was also filled with a mix of sorrow and pity for Lily, who had been cornered into a desperate act. As the judge called for order, Emma glanced over to her mother, who sat in the gallery. Tears streamed down her face, her expression a mixture of hope and disbelief. At that moment, Emma realized the weight of the accusation was finally beginning to lift. The truth was out, and she could almost taste her freedom. "Your Honor," Mark said, his voice steady again, "I believe we have enough evidence to clear Emma Collins of all charges." The judge nodded, her gaze shifting from Mark to Emma, who felt the eyes of the entire courtroom upon her. She held her breath, waiting for the verdict that could finally change her life. Would the darkness give way to the light she had longed for? The tension in the air was electric, and as the judge called for a recess, Emma knew that the fight was far from over. But for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. As the judge called for a recess, the tension in the courtroom hung in the air like a thick fog. Emma stood, her heart racing, still reeling from the chaos that had erupted just moments before. She walked toward the exit, needing air, needing space to process what had just happened. Outside, the hallway was quieter, but the echoes of the court's turmoil buzzed in her ears. Suddenly, Emma felt a presence behind her. She turned to see Vivian Porter, her face twisted with rage and desperation. The socialite approached with an intimidating stride, her designer heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. "Do you think this changes anything?" Vivian spat, her voice laced with venom. "You think you've won? You're just a nobody who got lucky." Emma stood her ground, her back straightening as she faced her accuser. "I didn't steal anything, Vivian. You should have thought about that before you decided to ruin my life." Vivian's eyes narrowed, her anger boiling beneath the surface. "You think I'm the villain here? You with your dirty hands and pathetic existence? You're lucky I didn't have you thrown in jail for good. Maybe it's time you reflect on your actions." Emma replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. "You had everything, and yet you chose to destroy my life over a necklace." Vivian took a step closer, her breath hot with fury. "You don't know anything about me, Emma. You don't know what it's like to lose everything." Before Emma could respond, Mark rushed into the hallway, his expression serious as he assessed the situation. "Vivian, this isn't the time or place for this," he interjected, stepping between the two women. "You need to consider the consequences of your actions, not just for yourself, but for others as well." Vivian's shoulders slumped slightly, the fight draining from her as she looked between Emma and Mark. "You don't understand," she said, her voice lowering almost to a whisper. I did what I thought I had to do to survive. It was just a necklace. I never thought it would come to this. Mark softened his tone, sensing the vulnerability beneath Vivian's bravado. But it did come to this. You've hurt people, and now it's time to make it right. As the weight of her choices settled on her shoulders, Vivian looked down at the floor, her facade cracking. What am I supposed to do now? She asked, a hint of despair creeping into her voice. Emma watched her, a mix of emotions swirling within her. Anger, yes, but also a strange sense of understanding. You can start by taking responsibility, she said, her voice apologized. Not just to me, but to my mother, too. She didn't deserve any of this. Vivian's eyes met Emma's, and for the first time there was a flicker of acknowledgement. I don't know if I can, she stammered. You have to, Mark urged, placing a supportive hand on Vivian's shoulder. It's the only way to move forward. After a heavy silence, Vivian took a deep breath, her decision crystallizing. Fine, she said, her voice trembling. I'll do it. I'll apologize. They returned to the courtroom, and the atmosphere had shifted. The audience murmured among themselves as Vivian approached the stand, her demeanor altered. Emma's heart raced again, but this time it was with an unexpected sense of anticipation. Vivian cleared her throat, her voice shaky yet resolute. I have something to say, she announced, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. I want to publicly apologize to Emma Collins and her mother. I let my fears and insecurities drive me to actions that were unforgivable. You didn't deserve any of this. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes as she absorbed Vivian's words. The courtroom was silent, the weight of the moment heavy. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Vivian stepped down from the stand and walked towards Emma, her expression softening. I'm so sorry for everything I did, she said, her voice earnest. Emma hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, wrapping her arms around Vivian in a tentative embrace. The community, witnessing this unexpected moment of reconciliation, began to respond. Whispers of support arose, and a few members of the audience clapped gently, the sound growing stronger as others joined in. Emma's heart swelled as she felt a wave of unity wash over her. In that moment, the barriers that had once divided them began to dissolve. Emma realized that this was not just about the necklace or the courtroom drama. It was about healing, understanding, and the strength found in forgiveness. As she pulled away from Vivian, she felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted. Let's move forward together, Emma said, her voice filled with hope. Let's make this right for everyone, Vivian nodded, a glimmer of tears in her eyes. I'd like that, she replied, the weight of her past actions beginning to lift as well. And with that, a new chapter began, not just for Emma, but for Vivian as well. One filled with the promise of redemption and a newfound understanding that crossed the divides of their worlds. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new stories that come out. We post every day. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Thank you to everyone who has already contributed.